Thank you so much, and welcome to this session. Hope you've all had a good lunch. My name's Emily Jones. I'm a partner and I head up the US office of an international law firm called Simmons & Simmons, and we work with companies as they expand into new markets across the world. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with such a fantastic panel for this session this afternoon. We're going to be covering a lot with looking at space tech and climate tech and some elements of sustainability around that, and of course space tech and climate tech are both areas where we're just seeing incredible advancements, not only ones that are advancements that are shaping industry and business, but also have the capacity to impact our lives, our society, and our planet. So this is going to be a really interesting discussion, and before we start, I'd like to introduce each of our panel. I'll start with you, please. Lee.
Wonderful, thanks Emily. So I'm Lee Wilson, founder and CEO of Radiant Space Systems, and we're specializing in manned and unmanned space habitats with the objective of making in-space manufacturing commercially viable. I've spent the last 8 years in the space startup world and have a PhD from Caltech in ultralight deployable space structures.
Over to you, Lana.
Hello everyone, my name is Lana. I'm the founder and CEO of Ease Gentle. We are sustainable shopping intelligence for packaged grocery. And for some background, in my previous job, I worked as a product manager at FinTech, and I used to buy sustainability data for asset managers. And that's how we, as a company, got an idea. This data makes so much influence within the investment space. We can only imagine moving billions of dollars and democratizing this knowledge within the retail will make big, big changes. So excited to be here today.
Say it.
Hi there, folks. Zahir Ali. I'm the COO and co-founder of Positon AI, where we have revolutionized the mergers and acquisition and investment ecosystem by creating an end-to-end platform from sourcing all the way through diligence to close. But that's partially related to why I'm here. I'm also professor of space business, leadership, and policy at my alma mater, Thunderbird School of Global Management, and I'm a long-term veteran of space and sustainability technologies. And we're really looking forward to diving into that convergence here today.
Hello, my name is Gary. So in the previous company, I was the head of growth of the largest education social network. Before I got sold off, I helped grow them from 10 million registered users to more than 100 million registered users, and my specialization was in network effects. Past few years, I got really interested in the idea of crowdsourcing solutions to solve climate change. And what happened is that we grew a community that spread across 5 continents, and we're actively saving the Amazon rainforest right now in a crowdsourced approach.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So we are going to kind of split this session into kind of 2 parts. First, we want to get you all excited about some of the amazing technologies that we're seeing in this space and that this wonderful panel are involved with. And then secondly, we're going to do a bit more of a deep dive into what it means to be a startup in these areas and some of the unique challenges and opportunities that presents. So I'm going to go down the line here and start by asking Lee, what are the developments in the pipeline that are particularly exciting you right now, or that you think are going to be particularly impactful?
Thanks Emily. So I truly believe that in-space manufacturing is going to have a huge impact on people's lives in the coming years. So in 10 years' time, you could be sitting in a doctor's office being administered an anti-cancer drug that was manufactured in space. While you surf on the phone, the data going through the internet is traveling through ultra-high performance fiber optics, also made in orbit. Now, researchers have been studying these products for the past 50 years because of the truly unique environment present in microgravity. But it hasn't been possible to put these on consumer shelves because it's been so expensive and hard to send products and hardware from the ground to space and then bring them back again. But over the next couple of years, multiple companies providing solutions to the launch side and the return side of the equation. In our company, we're sitting right in the middle, boosting the manufacturing equipment on our space habitats. We want to be the innkeepers in this in-space manufacturing gold rush. And once that whole chain is complete, you'll actually have entirely new products coming on the market. You'll have increased capabilities that you just haven't seen before. So it's going to be a real step change, and it's truly an exciting time to be in the industry.
Lana, would you like to share some of the things that you're excited about right now?
Absolutely. So I think sustainability space has been really hot in the past, 5 or even more years. And initially we've seen that some of the solutions in the space, like direct air capture, has been incredibly expensive. So for a company to decarbonize their business, traditionally you go an extra mile. What happens? High five, good job, but that's about it. And buying this type of technology was almost unaffordable. Meanwhile, these days we see that there are so many new solutions coming up in the market, and companies are getting rewarded from the investor side, now a little more from the retailer side. And so that's definitely very exciting to see. And for our industry specifically, we see solutions within regenerative agriculture. And I'll say that may not sound like the area for investors that they're looking forward to, but it's a must. So even if the demand is not as great today, believe me, in a couple of years, we're all going to be buying it.
Thank you, Emily. When we think about ages of history, human history, we actually don't realize, but they're all materials dependent. To the point where we name the ages of humanity after the materials we have access to. The Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. Those are literally the materials we can touch, right? We are now currently living in an age of conversion, where we are converting from the carbon age to the metallic age, right? Metals are going to be the fundamental, critical commodity of life. And what that means is that our demand for them is growing exponentially, and our ability to produce them is not. So I'm super excited about the capability of space resources to completely change the commodities landscape of the world, to fundamentally avoid conflict, to empower peoples around the world that have not been empowered, and to help many nations get out of the resource trap, so that they develop economies that are sustainable for their people for generations to come. So as we look forward, we need to off-world the acquisition of critical minerals, as they're now called. They used to be called rare earths for those of us who've got a bit of gray in our beards or hair. And this is going to be the game for humanity. And it's critical because all of the renewable technology, all of the carbon capture technology, all the things we need to do to save our home are dependent on access to those materials.
So, for the past 250 years, with the onset of the industrial age, we've been doing a lot of random experiments with our climate. And we didn't think it's going to have an impact, right? But fast forward to 250 years, we realized, hey, you know what? Lo and behold, we are able to change our climate. Now we are labeling like what we've done over the past 250 years as, dude, it's like a crisis, it's climate change. But I believe probably in sometime in the near future, we'll probably use a different term to call it. We'll probably call it terraforming. And if and when we ever go and colonize Mars or Moon, whatever we learn over the next few years in terms of terraforming, to probably like start applying over there, to like recreate whatever ecosystem we have here over there. So from my perspective, instead of like doing blind experiments over the next few years, we can be very deliberate about how we go about modifying our climate. Very exciting.
Thank you so much. It's super interesting to hear such a range of different areas and developments. So let's just kind of zero in now a little bit more on what it's like to be a startup in this area. I think it's a really exciting time for startups, but maybe I could start with you, Z, just to talk a little bit about, what you think are the opportunities for startups launching in this field right now.
Absolutely. You want to think about this in terms of timeline. Nothing exists outside of time in our world, right? And that time is fundamentally related to the patience of capital, because you're not going to do anything without some cash, right? So when you think about it in space, there's the immediate opportunities, tremendous amounts of work that can be done and value to be created, leveraging data fusion, particularly with all the Earth observation data that is being acquired. And we need people to think about how you really fuse this data to create ways of predicting things and understanding parts of our Earth, parts of our economy, parts of our culture and society even, in ways we've never thought about doing before. As one of my professors at Cal always said, if you create a beautiful experiment, the universe will reveal itself to you. And then beyond that, that's kind of short term. In the midterm, you think about things like what Lee said, in space manufacturing, assembly and service. And then you have farther out things. Again, stuff that Lee and others are working on, where we're talking about long-term, large-scale human settlement of orbits and even planets. On the climate side, similarly, you can think about this as what can we do now, what can we do in the midterm, and what do we need to do for the long term? And the pressure is certainly extreme in that regard, because we know that our planet is hurt. And so there's a tremendous amount of work to be done right now in fixing and slowing down the climate change. But moving forward, to point at what Lana and Gary are talking about, in the midterm, you have tremendous opportunities to think about how we can be intentional moving forward. And then, of course, the long term, that's where a lot of the convergence lies, where climate and sustainability and what space provides in terms of technologies that are tested and proven in extreme environments to use minimal resources and to enable massive capabilities come together. So I'll stop there and turn it over to my esteemed colleagues.
Thank you very much, Z. Sort of turning to some of the challenges that startups face, quite unique, I think, in terms of all of those elements that all businesses need to consider when they're starting out. Perhaps, Lana, you could just talk us through some of the things that you think are a particular challenge.
Yes, I will probably share a couple of stories, not just from my experience, but also peer founders in the space. One, I think fundraising. A lot of times I see two extremes. One, when a founder is really passionate and there is a good environmental solution, but it brings zero value to the business. You have to think about that. That's not gonna sell, or what kind of promise are you making? And then there is another extreme where we see that the companies are, they have these commitments and they have to decarbonize, but if you're making the solution, it still needs to be impactful long term. And sometimes it comes down to some carbon credits I'm not gonna name, but it goes both on the founder side and investment side when it comes to climate tech. You have to be, just like mentioned earlier, more intentional. So yes, there are some short-term gains where it's low-hanging fruit, but what is really going to be around in the next 5-10 years? What kind of future are we building together?
So, talking about specifically what it takes as a founder in this space, Lee, could you share some of your experiences?
Sure thing. So this probably applies in many ways to both climate tech and space tech. And the first thing you need, of course, is a grand vision. But in and of itself, a grand vision is not enough. You need to figure out how you get from where you are now to there. And at least in the space world, you often can't do that giant leap. It requires far too much money, far too much work, too much time. And so you have to break up this process into a series of steps, each of which is manageable. And you figure out for each step, what technology do I need to validate and develop for it? And then, how do I commercialize that technology? So one example is a company that I know of who want to build robots to do mining on the moon, build infrastructure. But their first step has been to develop these robots for Earth-based mines to improve safety and improve the efficiency there. And that allows them to bring in revenue, develop the technology, and then they are ready and waiting for when the rest of the lunar economy catches up. So it's really about making sure that your startup's financially sustainable as you journey into a bright future.
So it strikes me that you've got to be incredibly strategic in this space, more so than I think any other kind of field. And there are a lot of big companies well known, so I'm sure many in this room who are making big leaps of innovation in space tech, for example, like SpaceX. So how, if you're a startup in this field, how do you compete, or how do you find your niche in this area when you've got those kind of big players? I wonder if, Gary, you could talk a bit to that topic.
In the case of the project we have focused on, I think the main challenge is to figure out how to get around the institutional inertia, right? Because Kakao, for example, the middleman is basically there's 3 big companies, and the way they do it is they surprise the price they pay the farmers. So every bar of chocolate you pay $1, only 6 cents go to the farmers. Now the farmers in Amazon, are they kind of smart? So they say, hey, it's not profitable. Right, you switch to growing soybeans, just chop down the rainforest. That's not good. So, well, we have to figure out a smart way to readjust the economic incentive in such a way that they say, oh, actually it's profitable to grow cacao. Then what it means for us, we have to figure out how to reconfigure the whole supply chain. And to do that, we have to somewhat displace the existing middleman. It's been around for quite a while and has a lot of institutional inertia behind them.
And maybe, there's a lot of myths, I guess, out there as well about how companies in this field grow and are built. And I wonder if, Lee, you could just talk a little bit about some of those kind of common misconceptions and perhaps what you wish kind of people talked a little bit more about in terms of the kind of startup ecosystem.
Sure thing. So this will be primarily, space focused, since that's my experience. But I think the biggest misconception is assuming that it's just like any other industry. Space is similar to defense in that it's very heavily regulated. Fly something there, you have to deal with an alphabet soup of government agencies, from the FAA, FCC, NOAA, with CFIUS reviews, with the DoD can get a say. And then on top of that, it's also a very expensive field to get into. You have, the hardware's expensive, but more so the labor can be very specialized. There may not actually be that many people working on particular cutting edge technology that you need, so you have to find them. And because of this combination, you also have to be careful about the startup advice that you take on board. You have to really understand what the rationale behind it is, because you have to do all your pivots much earlier on, because you've only got 1 or 2 shots at a minimum viable product before you run out of money. So you sort of have to be a lot more deliberate and strategic, as Emily was saying, to get there. I think the final misconception mentioned is that you don't have to be a space person to get into the space industry. A startup will have a core of space people, and then beyond that, they will hire a bunch of other people from different industries to bring in their skill sets, and they'll get on-the-job training. So if you do want to work in the space industry, there are clear pathways through startups here.
Thanks, Lee. I actually wonder if you could just also comment a little bit on this sort of battle for talent as well, in that kind of, we were just talking about SpaceX, you were just talking about kind of unique challenges. How does that kind of play out in your industry?
Sure. So to give an example, we have, Starship is coming online with huge excess capacity or extra capacity. And that means you can build some absolutely gigantic megastructures in space. But there are very few people who have designed megastructures before and done deployables. And so, I was hoping on a project like this, and they found me through a mutual, friend, effectively. And the one advantage in the space industry is very tight-knit, and it's such a small world. We run into people again and again, commits a year and so on. And so you have to network to really discover where the talents are in the specializations you need.
Wonderful. The value of networks, which is why we're all here today, which is fantastic. I don't think any discussion today or in any of these types of events would be complete without touching on generative AI. So I wonder if, you could just talk about how you see the impact of Gen AI on this industry and maybe how it could actually accelerate innovation.
Yeah, there's so much to say there, but I want to highlight kind of some of the use cases, for example, and the way of thinking that we've done it, actually using Positon as an example. Everybody, or a lot of people are looking at AI as some sort of magic bullet. It's not that, right? It's a tool. It's certainly a Swiss Army knife. It's a very powerful tool, but you have to know where to apply it. So like what we did with the M&A value chain, we took that entire value chain apart and said, where can we apply this strategically and intelligently that's going to really make an impact now, and then continue to build logically moving out forward. And when you think about what this is doing in space, generative AI is, everybody's focused on the LLMs, but I'm telling you, when it hits hardware, it's going to change the world so hard and so fast we won't recognize it. Because what this does, when you think about the way an engineer or a scientist, or even a designer, goes through a design space, we take a machete to it. There's just too many opportunities and possibilities to go through, and we certainly don't have the money to build them all. But we can do that now digitally. And Gen AI, applied to all of that, is already revolutionizing the design of things like rocket engines. Taking the number of valves, each of which has 3 to 4 failure points each within it, down an order of magnitude in the design of a rocket engine. So more reliability, more reusability, more robustness. On the climate side, the simulations of Earth system science that are informing our innovators who are trying to figure out where they can apply interesting solutions and make impactful difference in the climate are being aided by Gen AI in a similar way, because it helps them explore all the data while they sleep in a way that is unprecedented. This was started quite a while ago. DARPA has done research, other government agencies, right? DARPA is responsible for the internet, so it makes sense that they're in here, right? And so when you think about this, every startup needs to be looking at what it's doing through its value chain and unpacking it to say, where can we leverage Gen AI? It's not just for marketing, it's not just to help you write your reports, but in your technical deliverables. Leverage it, apply it, and accelerate.
Very, very exciting. We've talked, I think, a theme is emerging a little bit around our discussions of, on investment and finance and where do we get the funds to do all this cool stuff. So I'd like to get insights from each of you on how do you secure funding, how do you take advantage of government funding, of collaboration in industry. Lana, could you start us off by sharing some of your experience?
Absolutely. So I think our experience, Lee's experience, he will also share his. I think for a lot of climate tech startups, sustainability inspired, grants is not a bad place to start. If you have intellectual property, if you have some patents that are pending, you can already leverage that to kick off that R&D work that is expensive. So that's what we did with ES Gentle, and we later were able to secure more funding with angels also that were just professionals in the industry. Some of them never invested before, but they have seen progress, they have seen what we're doing, and they expressed interest, and I think that's completely normal. You should take that money. And later on, it will also help you to go to the next level and secure VC funding, which just happened for us. So yeah, I think it's definitely a challenging space, but you can buy time to show progress and to show traction as well.
Very, very important. And Gary, how about your experience?
So, very interesting question. Back when I was in high school and I was like studying the subject of economy, the first thing that occurred to me was that money is a figment of imagination, and we all agree that it has some value, therefore it does. However, when I start looking back at the business model, like you're trying to implement, most of the time what you really need is not money, but some other form of resources. So if you're very clear the model you're trying to build, as well as the resources you need, more often than not, if you find the person that owns the resource, maybe the resource is just sitting in the person's backyard, garage, or factory, just no one really cares about using it. You just go up, knock on the door, it's like, hey, you have that, right? It's like, you need that? It's like, no, can I have it? Great, thanks. It's like, here's your tokens. Perfect, there's your voting rights to the project. So we bypass the use of fiat a lot when we set up the whole project. That we have 200 plus members spread across 5 continents, and that was how we were able to move very fast. Though periodically we have to use fiat, mainly to pay the government and pay some service provider freighting companies and stuff. But yeah, I think the most important thing before you even go out to ask for a resource is to figure out fundamentally, why are you doing this, man? It's if you can actually convince yourself and your reason is authentic, and you tell the fellow human being in front of you, hey, I need your help. Because if you don't help me and I can't get this done, our future generations is done, right? You know what? It's most likely than not that unused stuff that's sitting in the garage, they'll be very happy to provide it to you. Yeah, just go for it. Get all the funds you need. Yeah, don't always go for fiat. Fiat is just imagination.
And Lee, how about your experience and maybe some insights on how that's worked for you?
Sure. So similar to Lana, when I first started the company, I spoke to another founder, and he basically told me that VCs will often not invest unless you have government funding already. But one thing that we had benefited from was the Silicon Valley Small Business Development Center, because they looked over our proposals before we submitted them, they gave us mentoring, and they were really helpful. So there's a lot of free resources out there for founders that you can take advantage of, particularly at the early stage, that are quite beneficial, and I highly recommend you looking into it.
That's great advice, thank you. So we are running up towards the end of our time this afternoon, so I'd like to end with a quick question for each of the panelists on how do we create a future that we can all live with? Lee, first up.
I think we need to be very thoughtful about the products and technologies that we develop and consider the second order effects, the ramifications, and then include that perspective as we develop these exciting technologies and build this exciting future. So it's actually one that we want to live in when we get there.
I think as founders, as investors, as consumers, we need to learn how to make better choices. They don't have to be the best, they don't have to be the greenest, but we need to get into this sort of long-term mentality once again, where we know everything has an impact. How do I utilize our current resources to make it positive?
Yeah, I'll take a little bit of a different turn on this. I think you have to take into account the political economics of what you're doing, because there's nothing you do now. You may do it locally, but everything by definition is global. Everything is digital. If it's not, it's probably not going to matter. And so you have to think about what tools you're using, like Positon, for example. You want every startup founder in the world to be on there and be part of a global community. But also, you have to think about the reality that 1/4 of the world's population is Indian and Chinese. And most of that is under the age of 45. Africa has an average age of 35. So when we think about where our markets are, where our innovations are, where our talent is, where our resources are, everything is shifting. The era of the Northern Hemisphere is ending. And we have to come to a reality and understanding of that and embrace the different ways of thinking around the world in a fashion that I believe that we haven't, particularly in the technology industries, where we're used to forcing people into things a little bit, and really be open to learning from the cultures and the people around the world and integrating that into the solutions we develop.
So I'm gonna come from a totally non-tech approach. If you look from Eastern esoteric traditions, if you look back far enough, history just repeats itself in this endless cycle over and over again, right? So just be at peace, man. The universe will just naturally unfold and just come back from the circle again. Meanwhile, breathe.
Note to end on. Thank you, Gary. Just want to give my thanks to the panel, and if you could show your appreciation, that was a wonderful session. Thank you so much.